Okay, so I've been asked multiple times over messages in Discord how I managed to put one of these bad boys, an Inside Gadgets wireless RX receiver chip, into a Game Boy Advance SP. I have done this 6 times now. You can see 4 of them right here. I have the other 2 put away for now, but each of these has their own receiver chip in it. So I can shiny hunt on all my SPs wirelessly. I actually use this guy as a controller. Sorry, it's a bit dusty. But it does have the Inside Gadgets transmitter cartridge. So I use this as a controller to, more often than not, use these 4 SPs as my main shiny hunting consoles. But I've done 2 more besides these 4, and I'm going to end up doing these 2. Both this black and this cobalt one. Both of these work perfectly fine. I actually got both of these off of Sendico, which for me living in the States is a godsend, because I buy about 200-ish bucks worth of stuff from Japan in their currency that's worth about 500 here. I only paid about 45-50 bucks for each of these, which that is just not going to happen again anytime soon in the US. Right now, you'd be lucky to get less than 60, unless it's at like a garage sale and they just don't care. But I'm actually doing a complete overhaul of both of these. Both these SPs are going to be completely different by the time I'm done with them, because I'm going to give them both their own new IPS screen. This just hasn't been taken out of the package yet. I'm going to be giving them both their own unique shell. So this is going to have a very similar color, actually, to its original shell, but it's got the same color buttons on the inside. I really like how they look. I'm going to be installing that as well, on top of a 850 milliamp hour battery, just so it can keep up with the IPS power consumption. And of course, this little guy. It's the whole reason why I'm even going to be doing this to begin with. So in total, this is 50 bucks for what I spent. The screen itself is the most expensive part. This was about 60 bucks. Shell is about 16, battery's about 7. The receiver chip is about 19. I want to say it's normally 12, but this is from Australia. I bought 2 of them, so it was about 14 bucks shipping. I mean, just 12 plus 7, calling it 19 bucks. In total, this is about an $150 bill. If you're doing it yourself, anyway. If you're buying it from someone, it's probably going to be way more. But it's going to be a fun little time, I think. It's going to require some soldering, so you're definitely going to need your soldering iron. Got mine. I would recommend something that is as thin as some insulated 32 gauge wire, if not some maybe more visible wire, because we're going to be fitting wire through a GBA SP hinge slit, which is this little guy right there. You can barely even see that. There's not much space for keeping the receiver chip inside the shell and actually having it wired up. So I've been using 40 gauge wire, which this stuff is, it's so thin, man. You can barely even see that on camera. That stuff is so thin. I think I found a measurement in millimeters. It's about 3 times thicker than the average human hair. So I'm doing a bit overkill. You can definitely use some thicker wire. That's just what I'm using. I think it's what's easiest for me. Use whatever easiest for you, but it'll actually work. So let me go ahead and just like give a general overview of what you're actually going to need to make sure all of this works. Like I mentioned, 40 gauge wire is what I'm using. Like I said, use whatever works for you though. Soldering iron, of course. I would recommend a pair of tweezers. Doesn't matter if they're like angled in the tip like these are, or straight like these are, whatever works. You're probably going to end up using them. I'm going to be using a pair of just nippers for cutting off the wire, so that'll be useful when it comes to actually soldering the receiver in. And I don't have an iFixit kit or anything fancy like that for the screwdrivers. but you are going to need a tri-wing and a Phillips head screwdriver. And these are just some cheapy little magnetic head screwdrivers I got off of Mercari for like $4. So I mean, they're not the craziest thing in the world, but they work. I'm trying to think if you really need anything else. And I don't think there is besides what's splayed out right here. And obviously like a workspace, but I feel like that should be a given. Yeah, I think that's about it. I think that's really all you're gonna need. So let me go ahead and just take apart the SP and start deconstructing it. So I've got a little bit of a better angle on the SP, and I actually found an old 3DS case that I had that has a couple cartridge slots that I think are going to be useful for keeping track of the screws. Because in total, there are going to be 15 screws. I want to say there's 4 Phillips heads and the rest are tri-wings. So there's going to be 5 easily accessible ones on the back. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When we take out the battery, there's going to be another one underneath there, so it's going to be 6. There's going to be 3 Phillips heads keeping the board in place to the inner half of the bottom portion of the frame. There's going to be another screw right here, keeping the hinge cover in place. This is its own separate piece. Then there's going to be 5 extra tri-wings underneath each of these rubber pads we're going to have to dig out. So it's going to be about 15 screws total. It's going to be a little bit to keep track of, so I recommend getting something to do that with. In order to start taking it apart, got to start from the back. You don't have to. You can start taking it apart from the screen, but it's not really great. It's definitely recommended you do it from the back first. So, gotta take out each of these screws. I always try and put them in their own orientation. So, for the layers of screws, like these 5 on the back, I'm going to try and keep them in their respective areas compared to the back. So like little square cartridge, square SP, I'm putting the right top corner in the top right corner of the slot of the case. Okay, so now those screws are out. Gonna need to go ahead and take a Phillips head screwdriver and start unscrewing the battery cover. That should lift up pretty slowly. Okay. Ooh, got one of the fancy batteries that I think were mainly used in AGS 101s, and this one doesn't have that much swelling on it. This one's pretty flat. Nice. Now, it's going to be one more screw at the very top of the battery cover area. Take that out. I want to put it on the same layer as the rest of the screws that have been taken out so far. Now you should be able to just gently lift off the back. Put that off to the side. There's going to be 3 Phillips screws keeping this whole board in place. It's going to be one right here, one right here, and one right here. Just going to take those out. These are always pretty easy, considering how most people that try and take apart an SP don't get past the initial 6 screws on the back phase, so these are more often than not untouched. It might help if I actually unscrewed the screw. There we go. I keep these in their own separate layer just to really help make sure I know where those 3 are, because those are some very tiny screws. From here, you're gonna be able to just let all the buttons fall out, whatever. It's gonna be a ribbon cable for the screen. This is taken out by just gently lifting up 2 small gray plastic tabs on the ribbon cable port, and then it should just attach. Got all the rubber pads stuck on there. This can easily be taken off. They're not glued in or anything. Now, realistically, you don't need anything else for this exact overhaul. All you need really is the board and the speaker, but that's not glued into place either. You can really just take that out, and we'll have a little layer over it that you're probably gonna want to end up keeping. But I believe that's all you really need from each of the SPs in order to actually start modding them. If you have another screen you want to put in to another shell, you can definitely do that. But in my case, it's going to be the IPS screen and a brand new shell. So all I'm going to need is this board and a speaker. Should be it. Don't know how I managed to forget, but I will end up needing the hinges in these because I did not order secondary hinges. I just went ahead and ordered everything that I showed off. So in order to take out the hinges, there's going to be a little screw underneath the ribbon cable. That is the Phillips screw. That is the 4th one out of 15. I can get traction on it. Should be able to unscrew it. And then it's on a separate slot as well. What that does is it allows you to take off this piece. It's just a little hinge cover that protects the ribbon cable inside there. That's all it does. But now, you should have access to this hinge right here. In order to get access to the other hinge, that's why we need to take off all these rubber pads, take out the screws, and take out the screen. All you're going to be left with is the inner half of this top portion and what's left over here of the bottom portion. So let me go ahead and get out just a little prying tool. I'm gonna actually end up using an X-Acto blade. For whatever reason, I was stupid for the longest time and used my pocket knife. And trust me, it is like insanely hard to do that. So I've got a tiny little X-Acto blade right here. It's nothing crazy. I'm just gonna go ahead and start digging at them. I'm gonna start from one of the sides. Push it in there real deep. Just try and pry it out. Since most of these have not been opened up that you end up buying, they're going to be glued into place. So it might be tough at first. I know most people use like wedging tools, which is fine, but more often than not, I've found that those don't actually get in there deep enough. As you can see, there's just a little screw just sitting there. It's a tri-wing. It's going to be like this for all 5. I think the non-bumped ones come out easier. Like you can see, that came out in 2 seconds. It's really not a difficult process. It just can be annoying at times with some of the rounder ones. That one came out pretty nicely. That did not take much effort. And since these are like somebody's old childhood SPs from Japan, there's going to be a little bit of dirt in there. These are definitely not new, I can say that with confidence. I'm only keeping another finger over the rubber pads just so they don't go flying off somewhere. Definitely prefer that doesn't happen. But now that I've got all 5 of those rubber pads off, just gonna shove those off to the side for now. Gotta take a tri-wing screwdriver and just start unscrewing. And those in their own layer as well. And since these are really short screws, they don't take much time to come out at all. Should take like all of 2 seconds to get each of them out. Okay, yeah, so this is where a little bit of a problem can come into place, but it's really not that big of a deal. like I said, these were glued into place, so sometimes there are just little layers of glue left over. You can just fish that out. Really not bad. I'm gonna go ahead and continue. Okay, so now both halves of the top portion of the SP should be completely separated. I'm gonna go ahead and close it. Take off this back half. Now you should just be left with the back portion of your screen. And just plop that out. I want to be careful removing it from this little slit. That is what you have to work with width-wise when it comes to your wires. It's really not much, and those are going to be bending constantly. So you're going to want to make sure it's strong insulation, but it's flexible. Because if it just gets caught in there and it's too thick, it will end up wearing down a lot faster over time. Like a lot faster. But now we have access to both our hinges. They each have their own little plastic flaps, where I found if you go ahead, just take like something small and get all the flaps down a little bit, not too far or too forceful, just try not to damage them. And then you get it into its open position, it is a lot easier to just push out. Of course, that is easier said than done. It doesn't seem like it's willing to budge. There we go. Okay. So if you just push them down enough, and then just give it a little bit of force when it's in that open position, it should just slide right out. So that's the left hinge. I'm just going to go and repeat the same thing for the right hinge. See it starting to give a little bit. Just try your best not to put too much force on those flaps though. If you do, then that will be one less thing for the hinge to grip when you're reusing it for your new shell. Oh, come on. Also, the only reason why it's best to get the frame in that position is because these hinges have very specific notches on them. And they are only meant to be put in a certain orientation, so it's the same way they're meant to come out. But to remove these little end caps, just slide them right off. Doesn't take much effort. There's like a little notch on the edge of each of these little caps where you can just push in the opposite direction. It should just come right off. So I've got a left and I've got a right hinge and a lot of spare plastic. So I've taken the liberty of putting on the hinge covers, the new hinge covers, onto the hinges I took out of the old SP. It's really not that hard. There's going to be a little bit of excess material on like this black part you can see. You're going to want to line up this little opening on the cover with that. It should be pretty smooth sailing from there. Now, put those in. All it is seriously just a put it in that position kind of deal. And then it should just click right into place. That one went in very smoothly. Should be the same for the other hinge. Should be able to just twist around a little bit, maybe find its place. Then should just be in. And when you close it, should make that nice satisfying click. It might not make the same click when you open it, but it'll definitely make it when you close it. And that is always super nice. For now though, you're not really going to need this back half of the button side or this back half of the screen side. You're probably just going to want to end up putting those off to the side for now. All you're really going to need is this whole ordeal, and I would recommend taking out the buttons to make it easier so you're not trying to bounce those all the time. If anything, it's going to be really easy to lose them while you're soldering everything into place. Because of the nature of an SP, there's not really a viable option to just solder all the wires and then shove the receiver through the hinge slit. You're going to have to put the board where it normally goes, right? And then you're going to need to constantly be soldering back and forth between the IPS screen and the board. So let me just go ahead and open this up real quick. The IPS screen installation is also pretty easy. It doesn't necessarily require a wire, but there's an option to. All this little wire is going to do is just going to give you different brightness options. So, building the IPS screen is really pretty simple. It's not that bad. Really all it is just taking this insulated layer of film, applying it to the back, lining it up with this silver portion, and this is going to prevent any sort of shorting. This is going to make it so while this is in place, none of the metal comes into contact with any sort of components on this chip for the ribbon cable. In order to properly put it on there, or at least what I consider to be properly, put that trash off to the side for now, is taking the ribbon cable, lining the brick connector up, bending it backwards onto the ribbon cable chip port, making sure it all clicks into place. There shouldn't be any loose connections or anything. It should just now be attached. It should be. Now what is annoying is because this juts out just a little bit off to the side if it's straight, you're probably going to end up needing to angle it so there's a lot less material sticking off the edge. Now, in order to keep this down, because this is going to get really annoying if you don't, the specific version of Funny Playing's IPS screen that I bought comes with just a little piece of tape. It's actually pretty good quality tape, it's just not much, and it can definitely be a pain to take off, but this is all it is. It's only sticky on one side, nothing on the other. So I go ahead, fold it in half. I make sure that the chip portion of the ribbon cable is out of the way. And I make sure that when I place it down onto the back of the screen, it's got maybe just a little bit of this sticking off, because that's really all you're going to be able to get. Now, that should be completely assembled as a screen. And there's this little layer of film, but I'm actually going to leave it on there for now. Compared to a normal screen for an SP, I believe should happen is you put it into place like this. The cable should curl around in a very specific way. I believe it should be like that, sort of. Sorry, it might be easier if I just take it out of the shell. It should be curling this way, I imagine, I believe. Should. It should. It's gonna be very tight to try and work with, but it is very much doable. Yeah, so based off of one of the SPs back there, I can see the shell through. It is seriously just that. It is curled around like that in the hinge. So when it gets put into place in the shell, let me go ahead and put it like this. Push that into place a little bit more. Actually, you might be able to get away with just... Yeah, never mind. Should be able to get away with just having it straight. My bad. Should be able to curl the ribbon cable through the hinge slits like that, approximately. Why is it not going to focus? Hello? There we go. Jeez. So it should be something like that. There should be a little bit of the ribbon cable sticking out of the slit. And because of the entryway, it is thinner in width than the actual ribbon cable, so you have to put it in at an angle. But once it's in there, you should have a pretty not so easy time getting it out. Like, you really gotta push it out. So it'll be there, don't worry. But from this point forward, you're gonna need to have something connected. And that'll most likely end up being the ribbon cable. So from this point on, the process is going to be very delicate. So I'm just going to end up taking this out as far as I can. Oh my goodness. It's been a while since I've done this, so don't be surprised if it takes me a minute to put the ribbon cable in, because it probably will. Oh, might help if that was up. There we go. Okay. So once it's connected, push in the little gray tabs on either side, and now it should be connected. This is where things get very tedious very fast. So in order to keep it from just plunging off and breaking the ribbon cable, I'm going to go ahead and fold it outwards like this, so it's more just stable and it's actually usable. Now, if I remember correctly, there is actually a test point for the IPS screen where I need to solder to in order to give this screen its brightness options. Let me go ahead and find that real quick. Should be pretty easy to find. I want to say it was somewhere over here near the D-pad. Where are you? Here somewhere, don't worry. That's not the one I got. That's not the one I got. Is that you right there? It might be. Nope, that's not it. Okay. Sorry, this is taking so long. You know what? It's all good. I believe it is test point. Where is it? It is test point Q120B. Q128. It's either Q12B or Q128. I can't exactly tell which. But this is where we start soldering. At least I'm going to start soldering. So let me go ahead and get out some solder. Gonna go ahead and nip some of it off from the coil I have. So from here, go ahead and zoom in a little bit. Pull up the camera properties now. We'll go ahead and focus it as well. Actually, no, I think that's fine. Yeah. So, gonna need to solder from this little pad on the ribbon cable to this little test point right here. Make sure your soldering iron's got a clean tip, by the way, that is very important. But, just be a little dot. Nothing crazy. And then same thing over here. Okay. I'm actually just going to add a little bit more. Okay, that should be more than enough. From this point, I'm just going to end up taking one end of this wire, soldering it to the ribbon cable. Sure it's got a good solid connection, give it a good little tug. And then for the other angle, I'm going to go ahead and use tweezers because there's a very good chance my finger might get in the way and I'm not trying to break myself. Come on. Okay. So, that little cable has now been soldered. And I always put it in this orientation so it's just out of the way of all the other buttons. And flatten it as much as you can. Okay. So, that's the first of 11 wires. And this is easily the most visible wire. Gonna go ahead and zoom back out. Let it refocus. So first things first, I'm just going to go ahead and test the screen. Make sure that the wire that is connected to is actually, working. So I'm going to go ahead and just real quick put on the bottom half. Whoa. Okay. It is definitely working. Now, what about brightness? Oh yeah, we're good. We are good. We're definitely good. Okay. So one thing I did not take into account is the positioning of the power switch, which is only very important because it automatically turns itself on. I mean, that little switch right there should be down, so keep that in mind if you ever need to test something, which you're going to be needing to do plenty of. So getting back in this position. Come on. There we go. So, first things first with the receiver chip. I would recommend just putting some solder on the first couple of tabs that you're going to need, which I always start off with ground and the 3.3 volt tabs on the right side here. Little focus, please. Okay, yeah, you can sort of see it. It's these two right here. They're a bit longer tabs, so it will require just the tiniest bit more solder. But you want to make sure there's enough on there to where a wire can actually grab onto. And I know I'm not using flux. I'm not that professional, okay? I just know how to do it. So there's a little bit of solder coming off the tab. I'm probably gonna end up putting some more on there, just so, like I said, there is something for some wire to grip onto. Okay. So the two most important soldering points on the board to the receiver chip are going to be ground and 3.3 volts. So what I took the longest time to find was a good ground point and a good 3.3 volt source. And I found that the link cable port actually has a ground post, as you would probably expect. And it's this little post that's the biggest off to the right of it. There's going to be 8 little ports right there. I use this for ground. And this little point all the way in the bottom right corner, VDD3, is what I use for the 3.3 volt source. I'm just going to go ahead and put a little bit of solder on this test point. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and get the 40 gauge wire that I use. And I don't have any exact precise measurements, which some people will not appreciate. I know that much. For me, it is definitely a just make the wire long enough and adjust it when you need to kind of thing. So I'm going to go ahead, make it pretty long. And this is going to be the wire. You can barely even see that. You can only see like the shimmer that it picks up in the light. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to flex the ribbon cable a little bit out of the way so I can get access to that little post. And because my wire is so small, I really have to keep track of it. Let's go ahead and heat up that post. And now I've got some wire coming from that post. So for this guy, I'm just going to go ahead and wrap him around the ribbon cable port. So like I said, it's not in the way of any sort of buttons or anything. Gonna take him if I don't drop it, which I definitely didn't just do. And I am going to shove him through the ribbon cable slit. Like I said, it is going to be much harder for me because of how thin my wire is. I don't think you can realistically use much thicker wire because of how many of these are going to be. For me, there are 10 more on top of the IPS screen cable, wire, whatever you want to call it. Big difference, but you know. You can use up to 12 for just the receiver chip. Like you can use both the triggers, A, B, up, down, left, right, and then select start. I don't use the triggers though. Like realistically, I don't see a reason for them. So I just don't use them. But once you get your little wire through the hinge slit, make sure it is going through the slit and coming out the back side. I'm just going to pull it until I feel a little bit of resistance. Then I'm going to make sure there's no nicks in the wire like there are right here. I can see that. Straighten them out. Then I'm just going to try my best to make sure it goes around the cable, the ribbon cable slit, port. I don't want it getting in the way of anything. More often than not, I actually end up putting it underneath the ribbon cable just by a little bit. Not by much, but just a little bit. just so it has a little bit of organization. And it is probably very difficult to see, I'd imagine, considering how zoomed out I am and how thin this wire is. I know, I'm sorry, it is going to be pretty hard to see. But you know what? It's fine, I hope. But now, I'm just going to take the end of the cable that I have. I'm actually going to lift this back up, line it up with the board, and then close the top half. Because from here, there's going to be a very specific path the wire has to follow. And just to be safe, I am going to go ahead and put the little layer of foam that the IPS screen comes with on top. Because as you can see with this one, the layer of foam, which is white, and it's just in between the receiver chip and the back of the screen, just to make sure that nothing shorts. Like, I've already put the insulated film layer on the back side of the screen, but it's really just to make sure. Really dependent on where you want to put the chip. Like, if you want to put it centered in the back, you want to put it a little bit closer to the ribbon cable itself, whatever. Just try and make sure that the wire you're using follows that path that the ribbon cable does, actually, because there's going to be a little slit for the ribbon cable as well in the shell. Make sure it follows the path of the ribbon cable. Match it up with the ground points on the chip. I'm going to go ahead and cut away that excess. Go ahead and take away that extra. There we go. It's going to be a little bit difficult. I'm going to go and use my tweezers. Okay. Go ahead and clean off my soldering iron tip. And now, there should be a good solid connection between the wire and the receiver chip. And set this off to the side. Take off the screen half. There is plenty of extra room for the little wire for ground to go underneath the ribbon cable. And there should be a solid connection between the other end of the wire and the points that you have soldered it to on the board. Just double checking that real quick. Yeah, okay. So, that was the hardest of all of them. That was the hardest wire to solder for this receiver chip. And realistically, it should only get easier from here. Just because that one is so out of the way. I want to say there are other ground points you can use, but that's just the one I use. And from here, I'm just going to need to do this 9 more times at 9 different separate locations. So let me go ahead and zoom in on the board and show the exact points where you're going to need to solder from the board to the chip on. So, I mentioned earlier how this little point right down here is going to be used for VDD3. On the receiver chip, that's going to be on the long pad right next to ground. For all of the other inputs, they are very mapped out. A is going to be this point right here. It's going to be TP0. B is going to be TP1, this solder pad right here. Select is going to be TP2, which is right here. Start is going to be right next to it, TP3, right here. The directionals can be a bit iffy, just because of how strange they are, but it goes in order down, right, up, left. And it starts up here on TP7. TP7 is going to be down. Next to it's going to be TP4, which is right. Up is going to be TP6, which is right next to that off to the left. And left is going to be off to the left on TP5, on this little pad right here. If you want to do the left and right triggers, the right trigger is on a solder pad right here, right next to the ribbon cable port, TP8. It's going to be the third one down in this little series of 4. And the left trigger is going to be TP9, which looks to be right here. On this solder pad next to this little thingy right here, I don't know what it's called, but it's right above the D-pad, above this little resistor right here, or maybe it's a capacitor, I don't know. I normally don't do those two, but I figured I'd show them off anyways. I normally just do the directional inputs, B, A, select, start. So first, I'm just going to go ahead and do VDD3 next, and then I'll probably end up doing A, B, select, start, and then the directionals. That's the order I do it in, and that's the order I find it easiest to do. You can do it in whatever order you want to, but that's how I do it. I'm actually going to go ahead and make a cut. I'm going to go ahead and solder all those wires because it's going to take too long if I keep on recording. So I'm just going to go ahead and stop it there for now. I'll come back to you later when I've got them all soldered in. Okay, so it's been about 2-ish hours, and I have soldered the rest of the wires. I know what you're thinking, 2 hours? That seems like a long time. It's because it is. This is something that is very delicate, so I'd like to take it as slowly as I can, and as carefully as I can. So, you can't really see it very well on camera, but there is now a wire going down from VDD3 through the hinge slit. There is a wire select and start going through the hinge slit, A, B, and the directionals are right here. You can see it looks like a mess right about there. It is a mess. It is rough. But all 10 of them have been soldered. And just to check as a test to see if it works, right? Gonna go ahead and I'm going to place the board into the shell, right? Gonna go ahead, place the bottom back half into place temporarily. Gonna go ahead and put the battery into its slot. And I'm also gonna take this Japanese copy of Sapphire, put it into the cartridge slot. So, what should happen here is, I'm gonna go ahead and set the screen down actually so you can probably see maybe a little bit better. Maybe I can hold it. What's gonna happen is when I turn this on, there should be a little red LED on this chip that should start blinking. And realistically, every directional input, A, B, and select and start should all be working properly. So give me a second, I'm gonna go ahead and readjust this so that it's a bit of a higher viewpoint. I'm just trying to be like really careful here. So, moment of truth. Turn it on. That is very bright. Oh my good lord. But you can see, or maybe you can't. Okay, well, take my word for it. There is a little red LED blinking right there on that little white segment. It is working, but can't see anything on the camera, so let me just go ahead and... Okay, that's way better. That is way better. Okay. So, as a test, I'm gonna go ahead and turn on my controller. You can see it booting up. It should have this little screen on it. And once it's connected, there's this little red LED that was blinking before should be solid. You can see it in the shadow. It is solid, so that means it's connected. I am now playing Pokemon Sapphire without using the console. Start works. What about select? Yep. Right, left, up, down. I can run by holding down B. What about the sign? Yeah, I can read it with A. Okay. So, I can play the game perfectly fine without using the console itself. Okay, that's good. That is very good. That is exactly what I want. So, go ahead and turn this off. Now that I know the test has been successful, I'm going to go ahead and reassemble it. Take out Pokemon Sapphire, as well as the battery. This is where some fun stuff happens. So, I always start reassembling these by taking this layer of foam, putting it on the back side of the screen, and laying the chip down. Now, I will admit this wiring job is not the cleanest one out of all the SPs I've modded. It is definitely not. It is probably the least clean out of all of them, but it still works. I think I might have to move that back a little bit, maybe bunch on all the wires together. I need to go through the little slit that's available for the ribbon cable. Not taking a Dremel to a brand new shell. So, I should be able to do now. Let's put that guy on there, making sure all the little wires are not getting caught in anything. I actually see one getting caught in something. But move that back out of the way. It is a bit of a mess. I would definitely recommend like using some anti-static tape to like bundle all the wires together. Just to make it look all pretty on the inside, you know. Just make sure all of it's being fed through the proper holes. Okay. Now I believe I should be able to begin reassembly. Or I would be able to if I remembered to take off that film. Dang it. Okay, that's fine. Shouldn't take that long, considering how this is mostly put together now. Just gonna go ahead and set this off to the side. Yeah, I've been rubbing my fingers all over this layer of film on top of the lens for the IPS screen because I know it's just a film layer. I've been utilizing that fact as much as I can because it makes it way easier to grab the screen when I'm putting all the new wires into place. Oh, that is lovely. Set that off to the side for now. Just gonna go ahead and put it back in. Okay. Foam layer, receiver chip. Gonna make sure all these wires are good and in place so that they don't get squashed in between the shell halves. Okay. And now we'll do the same thing again. Now, for the aftermarket shells, you can decide to use the screws that are given, but I would definitely not recommend it. Those screws are super cheap, really not that well made. If anything, they strip really easily, so it's just best to reuse the old screws from the SP you tore down. Now, I'm going to go ahead and take the first screw. Start screwing in the screws for the screen half. Make sure it's tight, but not too tight. Now that there's one in place, what I'm going to do, before I forget, is I am actually going to go ahead and put the hinge cover into place. As weird as it sounds, it is probably best to do that now because that is definitely something you're gonna forget. I know I sure forgot it, like, multiple times. So I definitely recommend putting it in early on. Also make sure that there are no wires that you've soldered in the way of any of the buttons. That is definitely something to remember. So with this, it should not be tight. Okay, it's not even in. Never mind. Okay, let me go ahead and try that again. And double check and make sure all the wires aren't getting in the way. And they are not. Okay. You can see a little screw sticking out of there. Yeah, because it's not like a flat surface and it's not a flat edge, trying to screw in a screw like that will definitely be difficult. And trust me, by the looks of it, you can probably tell it is. Normally, right, this wouldn't be that hard of a screw to put in. Oh my gosh, please. But since I have all these wires in place and the board is a factor now, it is definitely more difficult. Just make sure to have some force going against the screw with your finger on the side of the hinge cover. Is it even going in? Hello? There we go. Took me long enough. Okay. There we go. Finally. That took way longer than what it should have. It is definitely a finicky part to put in, though. For sure it is. Now let me go ahead and just shove this back half on there again. I'm gonna test it again, just in case. It seems a bit excessive, but my first couple times around, I went ahead and tested everything multiple times around. Just because there's always a possibility of when you move something that a wire shifts and maybe it gets crunched in something. It's always a chance. There's a possibility, you know? Now, I definitely recommend troubleshooting anything as it pops up, as you notice it. Realistically, it should go smoothly, so long as you find a good picture that's clear showing all the test points on a GBA SP motherboard, and having each of the buttons labeled out for you. I actually have an instructional document that's been created that I made a while back. I could probably update it, and I probably will end up doing that. It's got a good JPEG of both a clean slate SP motherboard and a labeled motherboard for those specific test points. It doesn't really intrude on anything. It lets you know exactly where it is. It's super nice. It also has a picture of the receiver chip and where exactly each point is on there, so that is definitely useful. Continuing on, we go ahead and keep on screwing in screws for the screen. Now, I definitely recommend being extremely careful here, because if you make like one little slip, then like your screwdriver might just go straight onto your new IPS screen that you spent $60 on, and you've already put all the cables in there. You really don't want to have to take it out, buy a new one, put another one in. Trust me, I'm not speaking from experience. I'm speaking from fear, because that is a very real possibility. Also, don't mind the order I put the screws in. I did not put it in probably the best way, because you're supposed to put them in like alternating corners. So like, if I did this one first, which I did, I probably should have done this one next, then this one, then this one, then the middle. But it's a little too late for that now. Is what it is. It's not like it's too big of a deal. It just can be sometimes, depending on the material you are applying pressure to. Since this is like an aftermarket shell, I would definitely recommend making sure you don't do what I just did, and you actually apply pressure evenly. So I would definitely recommend you go boom, 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 or like boom, 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 or something along those lines. Something that alternates. Okay. This should be the last screw. Should be. Let me go ahead and cover up the screen again, just because I do not want that to happen. That little nightmare scenario sounds awful. Okay. So I believe those are all in there nice and snug. Looks like it to me. Definitely check along the sides, because you can see the little seam lines that aren't so much seam lines, but if you push them inwards and you can see like any flex, then it probably doesn't have enough threading in the holes. Probably have not screwed it in enough, so maybe just a little bit tighter on like this screw. But as I could see, I was kind of bending the screen. I don't want to do that last time I checked, so okay. There's not much left to do. There really isn't. In the home stretch. Take off this back half again. I'm gonna very, very carefully lift up this guy. Gonna make sure there are no wires in the way of any of the buttons, because I do want this to be usable again, just as like a normal SP as well. So let me go ahead, get the buttons all laid out in there with their respective rubber pads. Unfortunately, there's no like special way of putting these in. It just kind of happens. I just gotta do it. Like, there are prongs sticking off of each of the buttons, except for like the D-pad and the select start, where like there is an orientation for it. So like, this is the A button. It's not really going to show up too well on camera because it's not wanting to focus, but it has two prongs going off on the top left and the top right, and then one coming out of the bottom. And the B button has one coming out of the top, the bottom, and the bottom left. So there are certain buttons that have special orientations. And the brightness button has like two little prongs, one coming out of the top, one coming out of the bottom. But besides that, the D-pad just goes in whichever way it wants to. Same thing with select and start. What is nice is that the rubber pad for the D-pad has like a little jut out where it has a hole. It actually lines up with a prong in the plastic of the shell that's sticking off to the right in our orientation. It's going to be the left if it's more in a playing position, but last thing to put in here is the speaker. Just put the little layer on there, and now that should come into contact with the board. Okay. Don't believe I've forgotten anything, thankfully. As of right now, there are just a few more layers of screws that I have to put in, and a single nut. It doesn't seem like there should be one, but there is. It's for the battery cover. The battery cover has to screw into something. So there is a little tiny nut right above the cartridge slot on this half of the shell that I need to put in. The aftermarket shell does come with one, but it, surprisingly enough, doesn't actually make a difference in this case, I don't think. It's like the only thing in the aftermarket shell I don't mind using, besides the shell itself, of course. For the most part, use the original screws. They'll last you way longer, and they'll just be so much easier to screw in. Those aftermarket screws, they strip so easily. Like, the heads just come apart, honestly. And before I put the rest of it in, though, talk about that little nut. It has a little square hole it goes into. That's what the nut looks like. It's nothing crazy. It's not going to focus, is it? Why would it? That would be too easy. Okay, whatever. You get the point. There is a small nut. It has a little hole for it right there. If you don't put it in there, like, directly where it's supposed to go, then it more often than not will be crooked. And that little bit of crookedness is really hard to get right and corrected once it's already in there. And got mine in there a little bit crooked, so I'm going to take my tweezers from the other side, push it out, try again. And I do take it by poking both of my tweezer prongs through the hole, because that is potentially the best way I've found to have it in an orientation you want. It is a bit tricky, but it's nothing I can't handle. I may be stupid, but I'm not that stupid. Okay, you know what? That's good enough, I think. I hope. And try pushing it in even more with something small if you think it's crooked until you're satisfied with it. Now I'm satisfied with it. Gonna go ahead, put the back half on, put all the 6 original screws back in, starting with the battery compartment screw, which is one of the shortest of these 4. Not 4, 6, my bad. And this one's like super easy and nice to put in, because it just has like little back part of the shell you can line the screw up with your screwdriver. Super nice. Feels tight to me. I'm not going to put the battery in yet. Going to continue screwing in the battery. Not the battery. No, can't screw in the battery. Continue putting in the screws. More often than not, I feel like having all the materials available to you is super nice, so I'm going to end up linking the page for the wireless receiver, the IPS screen, the shell, and the battery, all in the description. I'm gonna end up just putting it all in there. I already went over the price of it. It is not cheap, but I feel like if you've watched through most of this, then you probably already get that. What's crazy is that as expensive as it is, you still need to put in that much work in order to make all of it actually flow. It's insane. But I guess that's why labor pays well. If I sold this thing right now, in the condition it's gonna be when I put the rest of it together, it's gonna be like, I don't know, $250 probably. If I wanted to sell it, it could be like $250, maybe $300 on a good day. Now granted, none of the SPs that I've made so far, I've been able to find original donors for that exact price range. I think the cheapest one I found that wasn't given to me because I actually did get given an SP. It was a junk one, so it was from my brother. He kind of figured I could do something with it. The cheapest one I found that wasn't these two was, I want to say, about $70. It was still an expensive donor. So definitely keep that in mind when you're out looking for donors. Unless you already have one, which in that case, I guess that's besides the point, but SPs are only going up in price, it seems. Then again, so is everything retro right now. Honestly, can't say I'm surprised, considering how advanced some of the modding is getting. Like, holy. Becoming very readily available as well. But no stickers, no rubber pads on the screen or anything. We're gonna go ahead and put those on real quick. Unfortunately, the shell, the aftermarket shell that I had, did not come with any, like, dark blue pads. So I might just end up reusing the old ones. It came with black and glow-in-the-dark white ones. No, honestly, no, I'm gonna go and put the black ones in there. That's what I want to do. So I gotta get them out of the bag. It's really finicky bag. They decided, you know what, let's just make a removable compartment on the bottom of a Ziploc bag. So you get this. It's got a bunch of garbage little screws in there that I'm not going to use. They decided, you know what, let's just make it as small as possible. Let's just give the people who get this no room to grab anything out of. And I swear, this one is just stuck. There we go. Okay. There's one. There's two. So I'm going to set these down for the time being. Oh my good lord. Come on. Please? Work with me? 3. Might seem a little odd to put something that's black on this now that there's so much blue. But I honestly think it'll look pretty solid. I don't think it'll look bad at all. Okay, there's 4. It's right there, and there's 5. Okay. Now I've got a very small bag of screws that I'm not going to do anything with. Probably end up throwing them away, if I'm being honest. That is probably what I'll end up doing, because these things are trash. To me, at least. Okay, and I don't think there is like a specific orientation you should put them in. There might be a side that has like less molding lines on it, or maybe less visible molding lines when it's in the shell itself. I think there is. I feel like there is, and it's mainly, you know, for these flatter ones, not the ones that have the bumps on the top left and top right corners. So it's the top middle, bottom left, and bottom right put in. Obviously there's an orientation for these. The side that's flat goes in first, as it should. Honestly, you can't even really tell. That does not look bad at all. Okay. Now there's only 2 things left. There's really not much. And they're both stickers. Gotta remember exactly where I put the bottom one. I do have the other one right here, the Nintendo logo one, even though, you know, obviously it's not official. It is there. I want to say it's in the bag with the, is it in the bag with the batteries? I think it is. Where did I put that? That's the other shell. Oh, there it is. Right. Okay. Okay. Wonder where I put that. So, there's the other sticker. I do have 2 of these, one for each shell, so that'll be fun to put on. I'm gonna leave the Nintendo logo for last because this one is always a bit of a pain, just because of how big it is. There's so much you need to line up. Obviously, you don't need to have this on, but I definitely like it. I definitely like it. It's just a little bit off. Not by much, but it is off, I would say. What is nice is that although these are pretty sticky, they're not the stickiest stickers in the world at first, so I can take them off pretty easily and readjust it. Oh lord. Yeah, that is even worse now, huh? I was not expecting it to be that much worse, but it definitely was. Nope. Okay, maybe I'll try putting it on this way? Maybe? Oh lord. No, stop. That is the big struggle with this sticker, is just the sheer size of it and trying to get all of it straight. Oh lord. Yeah, this has always been a bit of a nightmare to put on. It definitely still is. Cannot say I'm surprised. If I said I'm surprised, I would be lying. Yeah, my mama said lying is a sin. I'm not even religious, but now I want to beat the devil out of this sticker. You know what? It's good enough. I don't care. No, no, I do care. Dang it, no! No, stop. No! Come back. Come back. Yes, okay. It's been recovered, sort of. I hope. Okay, you know what? That's actually pretty good. There's a little bit of offset on this side, but it is fine. Now for the very last sticker, which is always a bit hard to get off of its paper. Cardboard? Whatever it is? I don't know what it is. It doesn't feel like traditional paper, though. Oh. Huh. I don't think that was meant to come off, but it did. Yeah, I didn't think about peeling off the paper that's behind. That probably wasn't the smartest move on my part, but it's fine. It's fine. I swear, I promise. Okay. This is fine. This is perfectly okay. Nice. Very nice. So, just for like a little bit of a showcase for the LED, turn this on. You can see it blinking. Got a little bit of a rhythm to it. You go and turn on the GBA. You can see that. Oh, my bad. You can see that red dot is solid now. Doesn't have a game in it, obviously. You go ahead and just shove that sapphire back in there again. Adjust the brightness with the brightest button. You know, the usual stuff. Oh, Lord, that's very crooked. Okay, it's fine. It's fine. This is already a scuffed 31-minute recording for an already super long video. Lowest brightness option, right there. Okay. Just to double check, make sure all of it works. Okay. Yeah, sometimes that can happen. I didn't hold down B. Sometimes you can like push a button down and like twist it, and then it'll be permanent until you decide to twist it back. Now it has this little bit of stringiness to it. Holding down B on the GBA Pause menu. And a soft reset. Nice. Okay. This SP has successfully been controller modded. And it only took me like 3.5 hours. And it'll probably end up taking you longer if it's your first time. If anything, 3.5 hours for one of these, 3.5 hours, is about average for what it takes me to do now. So hopefully this helps out anybody that needs the information. I really hope it does. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a shout through Discord or whatever you might have to. Maybe in the comments, I don't care. Whatever works. There's definitely a lot that I didn't talk about. Like, I didn't talk about the wire organization on the right half of this board. I really didn't talk about how I routed each of the wires through all the components so they didn't run into each other, run into any of the buttons or anything. That is definitely something I did not talk about because I did it while I was wiring everything up. So, if anything, I don't normally like these clear shells either, but it definitely looks a lot better when it's something that you've done. So now you can just see that. You're like, yeah, I did it. Good for you. Once again, got any questions, feel free to let me know. I'll try my best to respond. No promises, but I'll definitely try my best. And I really, really hope whoever is watching enjoyed. Really do. Thank you. I appreciate it.